Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bring out my distinguished panel. Nabil Bitar, CTO Office, Head of Network Architecture, Bloomberg. Daniel Lawson, Senior Vice President of Global Solutions from Verizon Business Group. Raleigh Mann, Senior Vice President Technology, Williams Sonoma. And finally, Oliver Spatschek, AVP MTS Network Data Services API and Integration at AT&T. Welcome. Welcome, gentlemen. So here we are gathered to talk about enterprise automation, how important it is. And this particular one is, you'll be shocked that until now, no industry forum has actually taken on this body of work. And what I'm talking about is the fact that you take a step back and you consider the fact that networks are a vital utility for enterprises. And yet, until now, there has been no standardized and automated way of communicating network outages for any of their circuits, whether it's dark fiber, IPVPN, SD-WAN, you name it. There has been no automated and standardized way of communicating what happens to the circuit in terms of degradation, impairment, whether the circuit goes out or the circuit is being put in maintenance. Email is very archaic. It typically gets lost. And multinationals have circuits all over the world, and they can hardly get to emails in time. So MEF, with the input of the Enterprise Leadership Council, has defined a circuit impairment and maintenance service API. There's actually an innovation demo outside. Later you can look at it. But so here we are to discuss that, and all these gentlemen and their companies have participated in the first MVP demo of SIM. So with that, welcome.
Thank you.
So let's talk about why this has been the case for until now. So maybe I'll start with Daniel, you. Why do you think this particular way of communication has lagged?
It's a great question, Sunil, and one that we've certainly discussed a lot with our enterprise customers and our partners in the carrier space. I think there's a few things here, right? One is, if you look at the last 20 or so years, most operators have been focused on wireless. Right, and so deploying spectrum, evolution from 3G to 4G to 5G has certainly been a big part of the capitally intensive nature that a lot of the investments are happening. Also, I think as enterprises have evolved, as we've seen enterprise architectures evolve, cloud has become a bigger part of pretty much every industry on the planet. Mm-hmm. The industry now is much more of an ecosystem type of industry, whereas if you go back 10 or certainly 15 or 20 years, there's a whole lot more sole source, mm-hmm. types of engagements. And so, when you have that closed ecosystem, it's a little bit easier to, build homegrown tools and capabilities and use something that's not necessarily spanning across the entire industry. I think as we've seen the transformation of enterprises and public sector organizations for that matter as well, mm-hmm. to leveraging best of breed or in-region capabilities or distributed application architectures, the need for all of the components, all of the players to work together to orchestrate services, ultimately with the customer's workflow in mind, not just internal-based workflow. I think all that has contributed to maybe not necessarily a lack of investment, but just maybe taking our eye off the ball for the entire end-to-end view. Because sometimes there's a tendency to say, okay, well, this particular element that I'm responsible for is working fine. I've done my job. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't really work that way anymore. And so now I think certainly the carrier community is starting to realize that. You have to be a player in the broader ecosystem, and one that can really partner across the aisle.
Yeah, so basically multiple dimensions of and multiple different ways in which this being consumed. It is adding to the urgency of how we do this. Yep. Oliver, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think one thing I can add is that it also takes both sides to make this work, right? I mean, you need actually tools on the other side which can call those APIs or receive data from those APIs. Otherwise, there's little incentive.
Sure.
And that requires really kind of some standardization and also coming together, because nobody wants to integrate with like hundreds and hundreds of different APIs to receive that information. And honestly, I think the cloud guys probably led the way there in a little bit. If you ever use the cloud, no matter which one of the three, they have actually a quite sophisticated outage API sets out there.
Sure. Yeah. Which is a good thing, which is absolutely. Definitely a good thing. So Nabil or Raleigh, we'll start with you. How have you dealt with this? Maybe we'll start with you, Raleigh. Until now, I know it's, as they pointed out, it's become very urgent, and you might say it has been urgent forever, but how have you been dealing with it?
With humans and email. I have an offshore 24/7 managed service partner for my NOC, if you will. Emails from all of my providers go into a distribution list. Hopefully the MSP has enrolled all the rotating people in and out. They then pick it up, copy and paste it into a ticket. They then call a vendor, try to see if they already have a ticket, and then capture all of this. And naturally that leads to all kinds of errors, right? Email is just terrible for workflow, especially operationally. It's fine for, FYIs and setting context and whatnot, but it just doesn't belong in my internal service level objectives for being notified or notifying even my own internal business partners that we have an issue, that I'm aware of it and that we're working on it, and what the ETA is for repair. I can measure everything that goes into a ticket. Email, I can tell you from a header when it came into my server. Did one of the 18 people pick it up? Don't know. With a ticket, it automatically goes to somebody on shift. I have an SLA or SLO for them to acknowledge it and begin working the trouble, and I catalog all of that. And so I can work on process improvements that way. I really can't do much with email. Sorry, we missed it among the hundreds of other emails that came out. And if we did bonding with our ticketing system to everyone else's ticketing system, the uplift there is each one's going to be unique. Yep. Sure. I can do that with email as well. I can interpret that, but if anything changes, then my automation's going to fail when it comes to the syntax of that form. If literally anything changes in the subject header or expected body format, my ticketing system won't pick it up. An API, I don't have that problem. We've agreed on what the standards are. We exchange that information, and we're off to the races together.
Got it. Nabil, similar?
Yeah, I think it's very similar, actually. I think everybody hit on the key points. I'll emphasize two things. I mean, why we're here. I think operations used to be very human-centric, if you will. A lot of manual process in place. Maybe it was working when the number of operators to which enterprise connect to was small. And probably, it's always we say reliability is important, but probably is more emphasized right now. Sure. To be able to maintain consistency in the way you respond to things, and to have reliable operations, if you will, to provide reliable services. From experience point of view, I think today, basically what Raleigh had described is pretty accurate. I think, again, goes back to how things are handled. Basically, email comes in, somebody looks at it, generate ticket, and hopefully they would generate ticket as somebody gets it and take action. The thing that what the focus right now is really on automation for the key attributes that I said earlier, which is improve reliability and provide in time, if you will, remediation when things happen, detection and remediation as a result of that. So the way to do that is to really resort to system to get notifications and process them to generate an action. The action could be an alert, or could be, as a matter of time, take a remediation action or do something as a result of that.
So we'll get into the implementation in a bit. I want to dive into that a little bit in terms of how you intend to implement it. But maybe for everyone here, can you describe the solution that we've done here and what we are showing in the MVP here? And then we can talk later about how we are planning to all extend it beyond that.
Very good. So first of all, I mean, it starts from the conversion. Obviously, we don't want to do emails anymore. We want to revert to APIs for system to programmatically get the notification and act on them, right, to start with. That's really the fundamental problem that we want to deal with. So what we've done, we've started with the first use cases that the LSC had outlined, which is circuit impairment and maintenance notification. And essentially what that service is on one hand, if there is maintenance going on, there is usually an event generator on the operator side. The idea in here is that the enterprise in this case will be polling to see if there is something pending for them. They'll get notification there is something. In this case, it will be maintenance. They'll get it as something is pending for them, and they could retrieve that information, what it is. And as a result of that, there could be processes, all this is system driven, that could generate a ticket as a result of that. So if, for example, if there is, what's the implication of that? If there is a maintenance going on, you probably want to make sure that on the side where there is maintenance, your redundant path is working. Because if that's not working, there is maintenance on that side, your service could be out. Sure. So you want to ensure things like that that could happen. If there is a problem that happened at that point in time, sometimes people run around to see what the problem is. If you know that there is maintenance while the switch over of the traffic takes place, let's say, you know that problem happened because there is maintenance. You don't have to go and dig too much to see what the root cause is. So all that stuff really help really reduce the time to identify what is the root cause of the problem when it does happen, or to be able to take proactive actions to ensure that there is something else that could be working while that happens, or maybe deliberately diverting the traffic away from that maintenance time window before the traffic gets hit. So that's the benefit of that. The other part that you could get as you pull information, again, we're talking, so when you say you in here, meaning we as enterprises, pulling things from the providers, this is our system interacting with that system, could be impairment. So one of the problems that exists today, if there is what we call brownouts, for example, that happens within the carriers. Let's say there is high packet drop, or there is a path that could impact the failure, could be fiber, could be routing failure, whatever happened to be the transport. If there is a failure that could impact your traffic, and now suddenly you see a drop of traffic, you don't know exactly where it happens, it will be nice if you're connected through a one carrier at least, to be able to know that the problem happened somewhere within that carrier. And then you could monitor that as a function of time. You could probably, if need be, you could escalate to the right people to try to correct the problem and so forth. And in addition, you could take proactive action if you have alternative path to reroute the traffic over that. That's really the essential business outcomes that you look at out from these APIs that you're getting.
Yeah.
And again, to emphasize in here, I think obviously the way you interact system to system, there was some attention paid to that in the development process of this API, in the sense that to ensure authentication, to ensure security, and how the system interact as well.
That's great. So Raleigh, now that we have this, what and how are you considering in terms of what is the tooling you're using? If you can give some understanding to everyone on what is the tooling that you're using currently, how do you intend to implement this, consume this as you get this notification APIs?
Sure. I mean, it's pretty easy. The API is very straightforward, implementing it on a edge service of my own so that I can reach out and I'll pull that in directly into my ticketing system. Matching both the vendor and circuit IDs on a table, easy lookup, fire off a ticket, and then likewise, if it is an impairment, I would expect a ticket information in that notification. So now I have that pair. If it's maintenance, ideally we'd get that notification before the maintenance, a couple hours, if not days. If it's scheduled maintenance, then I can just raise a change that shows that it's going to be under vendor maintenance. So as Nabil was saying, we don't waste a lot of time troubleshooting a remote monitor that's now failed. Yeah. It's very easy to implement, very lightweight, does not take a lot of development. And then, for us, our ITSM is ServiceNow, but you could use any ticketing system, homegrown or not, to make this match.
Very good. So Daniel, how do you intend to kind of roll this out? Are you focused on certain types of services first? And then are there other things that you're planning in terms of, more enhanced functionality?
So I think for us, as Oliver pointed out, I think the cloud folks have done a great job of sort of at the application layer establishing digital interactions very eloquently. I think the same is true of the tech OEMs, the SD-WAN providers. So I think at least initially the value is in the transport layer, layers 1, 2, and 3, because that's where I think we've lacked instrumentation, whether it's maintenance driven or incident driven. So for us, whether that's public networks, private networks, layer 2 Ethernet or layer 1 wave or dark type services, that to me I think is the easiest place to start, but also the most the quickest path to value for the enterprise community. I think that's particularly true of customers with a large footprint, like Raleigh and the Williams-Sonoma footprint, but also really any retailer, small box, big box, retail banks, all those sorts of things, because the more sites you have, the more locations that you might have subject to backhoe fade or any number of other things that we witnessed through the years. And so separating the signal from the noise, and then using that to not just integrate system to system, but to really take a step towards process integration, so that we can inject information into the change management workflow for scheduled maintenance or the incident workflow for unexpected outages. That to me is the sort of the next step, is how do we then enrich the data in such a way that it drives contextual understanding, and then we can collectively build workflow around it. So simple example might be, if you've got a circuit from AT&T and a circuit from Verizon into a similar location, there's one maintenance scheduled on one carrier, the other does not, right? You can now orchestrate across a single pane of glass for the enterprise, right, to deliver a business outcome, right? Not just, hey, my circuit's up, but we're going to keep this store up so that we can transact business during the busy season or things like that. So to me, I think enriching the data would be step 2, and then seeing how that can incorporate into other sources of data to derive even better and more specific actionable information. So taking the SD-WAN controller data, taking the application workflow data, and taking the network data to create a really sophisticated level of correlation. And then having that drive action, which is ultimately the most important thing.
Excellent. So we've got the MVP, and of course we all collectively discussed how we want to extend it beyond that. One of the clear use cases that we've dealt with the first mile from the retail provider to the enterprises, but clearly there is a use case, and this can directly apply from the wholesale provider to the retail. You both are active in that markets as well. So does that make sense to kind of do this between the wholesale and the retail as the next step? Is there any specific or different things that we should consider, expect between that interaction?
I think that's going to be a critical enabler for not having to reinvent the wheel with every digital customer integration across the footprint. I think having partnership across some of the larger global providers is the right place to start. It is obviously a little bit more straightforward to deliver this type of service for an on-net circuit where we own the infrastructure end to end. But I think the next logical evolution is that retail to wholesale handoff for last mile. Certainly, in the major population centers, the major cities where business is transacted around the globe, that's going to be the easiest place to start, where you've got likely organizations that are like-minded in terms of not wanting to deal with the same level of data that you don't want to deal with, right? Driving a different level of automation that could potentially limit truck rolls and take cost out of the business as well, and provide higher levels of service. And then I think, as with everything, right, adoption doesn't happen overnight. Understanding for Nabil and for Raleigh, what the actual value is that we're delivering, how that creates, more capabilities in in the telecom space, and then how we continue to level that up over time.
Sounds good. So Oliver, I know you're very passionate about having this functionality and extending that to mobile connectivity. That's an obvious next step that we can venture into. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you look today, at least most of our customers, they don't just buy one service from us, right? They buy many services from us. They buy, what's usually covered on the MEF side, but then they also buy consumer broadband, they buy wireless, both for their employees, for tablets, for IoT devices, which they deploy, you get connected cars all over the place.
Sure.
Right, so it's a fairly broad thing. And so now if you want to operate that, I just put myself in the customer's seat, right? Well, I don't want to have one API I call for my fiber and then like 27 other APIs for each of those services I'm trying to buy, right? I want one API which I can call, which gives me the answer for all of them. And then I also want to kind of, and that's another kind of extension, I want to kind of somewhat converge view what an outage actually is, right? Because what an outage is can be very, different in those different scenarios. It can have different impacts, different definitions.
Sure.
And so I think to make this really grow, all the way through, we have to address both of those problems, right? We have to kind of converge it across all the services we sell, all the connectivity services, as well as have meaningful definitions across all of them. Right, and so there it's actually, today I think that there's actually a challenge because MEF is going with this one, is clearly a little bit ahead, but TMF has competing standards which work in that space, right? And one goes more after wireless, the other one is more wireline. So we're already kind of starting to bifurcate this space, and so will be, I think, very important for us to focus on driving that alignment to not end up with multiple ways of doing that.
Sure, sure. So, but as we extend to mobile, what are you thinking in terms of, are you going to tackle, or would you want us to tackle the connectivity to residential subscribers or also to business, or both? We have to pick one to begin with. There might be some intricacies between the two.
Look, I think at least when I look at it from my perspective, I don't think there's really a big difference, right? They run on the same wireless network, an outage is an outage, and we do impact assessment on all of them, right? If you would, if you will expose it to the consumer or the business people first, I'm on the technical side, I leave that up to our business people, trying to figure out which one goes first, but I think at the end you probably want to deal with both in one way or the other.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think particularly with wireless broadband, for example, right? Whether what we call 5G home for our consumer business or FWA, fixed wireless access for our enterprise and public sector clients, the network is the same. The information required is the same. I agree 100% that we have to have a common taxonomy so that you don't have to translate, you don't need a Rosetta Stone going from provider to provider. And so understanding how we can keep the two streams close together, because at the end of the day, the technology is important, right? But only in as much as it delivers, the use case, the service that runs over the top of it. So whether it's carrier Ethernet or internet or residential broadband or wireless broadband or anything else, we just need it to work. Yeah, no,
100%. And look, I think, as Oliver pointed out, and you've said it, the technology can be the same, the solution will be the same. It's then all about whether Sunil is important or a certain Bloomberg business is important to be notified for mobile connectivity going down. I'm trained to just, I must have moved away from the tower. Let me find a Wi-Fi solution. But what are you gentlemen thinking about in terms of when we extend this to mobile? Of course, there is going to be, IoT being a classic use case also for this. Is that already an issue for you? Are you thinking about this being applicable there, and how urgent is it? Is it as urgent as the wireline solution?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, we know who is more important.
Oh, thank you.
No, just kidding. I didn't say who, but on a serious note, I think the thing is that yes, there is. I think obviously from business perspective, I mean, we talk about SD-WAN, for example, right? Most of the connectivities that probably people are looking at often is going over wireline. Whether it's dedicated internet access, an MPLS circuit, or broadband, right? Either of them could happen, and I'll focus on that. But sometimes there is either desire or people already there in general, where there is also connectivity over a wireless network as backup, whatever the primary, the business drivers are. So therefore, if I look at from that aspect, the same problem persists.
Sure.
In the sense that, I mean, the good thing about SD-WAN, you do measure consistently the end-to-end path between two endpoints, because the way that the technology is built, and you check the quality of the path and so forth. But the point still is, if there is connectivity, let's say in the first hop connection, I'll call it that way, like for example, there is impairment in the wireless provider network, it will be good to know about it. If there is impairment that impacting dedicated internet circuit, it will be good to know about it. If you're using an MPLS service provider as VPN MPLS service provider, it will be good to know also if there's an impairment in the middle. At the end of the day, the objective is exactly the same, that you want to ensure that what you subscribe to as a path for your traffic, which is supposed to be important traffic, what is impacting those paths, to know that the quality, how you're routing the traffic, and if there is a problem that happens, you know where it happened, right? And then you act based on that. So.
Raleigh?
Yeah, fixed wireless is a big part of my strategy going forward, right? Retail branches, I have them spread over predominantly North America. The last mile is generally served by a common LEC. So whether it be broadband or MPLS services, I don't have diversity of true carrier at that last mile. So fixed wireless helps me there. It will become a primary path for me, not just a backup. And so knowing that that service is impaired or not working at all will become critical, because that's the difference between troubleshooting on-prem CPE or application layer, software policy maybe, right? Versus, oh, it's transport. Transport's transport for me.
Sure.
So I need all the packets to work. I need the applications to function. That's my business. Doesn't want the network, it needs it, right? Yeah. And so at the end of the day, that's what's going to be critical for my organization.
Excellent. So we have just about 2 minutes left, but I think it's important for everyone to understand that Enterprise Leadership Council, which is our newly minted leadership council, getting the focus of MEF being that we want enterprises heard at the leadership table and in the working groups. And this body of work is one of the first ones that the Enterprise Leadership Council identified last year. You both, Raleigh and Nabil, have been the founding members of the ELC. We started with 4 members. We've now grown to 14 Enterprise Leadership Council members representing different verticals, enterprise verticals. And there's several things that the Leadership Council has already identified in terms of the work items. So this is, we're looking at a much broader set of issues and things to solve for the industry, not only for here and now, and this might seem a little tactical and the same, but it's highly important, as you just heard, but it could go into AI use cases, it could go into security, cybersecurity use cases. So maybe in the last 30 seconds, quickly, can you talk about Raleigh and Nabil, a little bit about what our overall plan is?
Shall I go?
Yeah.
All right, so I think as Sunil summarized, we started with this as initial use case because there is immediate need for it. What we have in the pipeline is addressing the cybersecurity issue. In particular is getting notification of threats, whatever form they could be, and we need to scope that probably a bit more, that have been detected, let's say, by the provider in that case. The second one is really the reverse. If you decide to take an action on a certain type of traffic, you could communicate back to the provider that you want to take action on that and what the action is. The idea in here is that to have a standardized mechanism to allow both directions of the interaction, similar to what we've done with the SIM. And the benefit of that really from enterprise point of view is that you develop the API once to interact with many service providers as opposed to have bespoke implementation with every service provider. And that's a big burden today, especially as we talked about earlier, when things were the number was small, things used to be very human intensive kind of operations. When you start growing, reliability becomes important, just-in-time response becomes important, is important to automate, and the only way to automate is by resorting back to APIs that are standardized, so that time to market, in addition, that they could be processed by systems.
Yeah, perfect. Anything to add?
Right. Just obviously by having a common API that we use, my cost to invest in the development is better served when I can spread it across all of my service providers. So it's a no-brainer, and enterprise has grown up in the last 5 to 10 years to expect APIs, as the cloud providers have done, Oliver pointed out. So we're ready for it, and we're here to somewhat demand it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.